Welcome to the Author's Porch, where every good conversation happens. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride from author to author. We want to give you an experience where you learn and enjoy the conversation. Authors tell you about their journey, you learn about new books, and at the end of the day, you go home with a smile on your face because the Author's Porch is a beacon of light, bringing you home to the family you never knew you had. We hope that you enjoy the show. Hey everybody, welcome to the Author's Porch, where every great conversation happens, and it happens because we trusted Brendan and Vamsi at Master Talk to show us the power of effective communication. We also make sure we have a great cup of coffee from Third Day Coffee Seguin, a Christ-centered, veteran-owned coffee company. Today on the show, we have Lara Sabanosh. How are you doing, Lara?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Thank you for being here. And even though I practiced before we came on, I still struggled to make sure I said it correctly. So Laura.
Yes,
Oh my
you did great.
goodness.
Thank you.
Oh, guys, let me introduce you to Lara and the wonderful things we're going to talk to on the show today, because it is one of the fields that I studied myself in school and I wanted to understand a lot about because of the struggles that I dealt with in my own life and in my home life growing up. But Lara comes to us highly educated and accomplished within the field of psychology. She wrote the book Cage. She is the author of the book Caged, and she dedicated her life to helping others, beginning in her youth as a volunteer and continuing in her entire career. She has made it a priority to aid individuals in finding and meeting their emotional, educational, and professional goals. She has been counseling children and families and facilitating civilian and military members in social and educational leadership. So, Lara, I commend you for the things that you have been doing for civilians and our military at home and abroad, because it is absolutely phenomenal. And I am excited that you chose our show to come and talk to about not only the things that you were able to help people with in your professional career, but now that you have retired from your civilian and your civil service job, but now you're still wanting to give back by authoring books that will help people as well within the mental health realm. So I want to talk about going all the way back to when you decided to work within this field. What was that pull to want to help people?
Sure. I like you had talked about, I'd always been in helping fields, even when I was in high school and younger. My family has always been a part of programs and areas where we either did volunteer work or getting involved in different areas. I remember when I was younger and we did guide dogs for the blind.
Wow.
We knew not to foster the dogs because the attachment too great. We're very much dog people, but
Mm,
we did participate in programs that enabled us to get involved, help other people. And that's pretty much stemmed throughout my life, in my children's lives, and in our family altogether. And we continue those, whether it's through different programs today, and a variety of them, getting
yeah.
involved in different community efforts. So my education goals actually started quite different when I went to school. I was looking into, I actually started as a speech pathologist, in
Really?
the program. So it was wildly different, but still
Yeah.
in the helping fields. My goals changed as I was in my own personal needs, very much like you were talking about, as I saw things in my life that I felt could, um, I I needed, and my education then changed with that, and I continued to pursue that throughout my adult lifetime.
Mhm.
And what I found was, well, I wasn't really helping myself.
Mm.
I was helping other people in different
Yeah.
mediums, whether it was through education, through counseling services, through transition services with military members. And I found that was the most satisfying, was to see how that information could morph itself into assisting others. And even if it was just helping somebody and it wasn't in um, an employment capacity, and that's even today. So I'm retired, but finding where if somebody needs something, it doesn't have to be a paid role.
Yeah,
But
for
giving
sure.
somebody, if they ask, finding somebody that needs help.
Yeah. Well, I want to commend you on not adopting the dogs because I ended up with 6 because I see a dog in need and I tend to bring them home and I can't let them go after that. So I think it's very amazing that you were able to do things without bringing all of them home.
And we do too. So we're big into rescues ourselves.
Mm,
This is I have in with us. I have three. I'm on my third rescue, and my daughters have rescues. And
yeah.
so for us, I think part of it has to do with where we've come ourselves, and now we've turned it around, and
Right.
the rescues have become another outlet for us as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and they absolutely do. Now, when I was growing up, we didn't help anybody as far as like a job, but we always anybody that needed help, my grandma always brought them in, gave them a good meal, things like that. Gave them a place to sleep. And growing up, I wanted to be a police officer, and then I wanted to be a lawyer, and I never thought about psychology. I never thought about that type of stuff until I went through a domestic violence situation. It was emotional violence. No, I never had anyone lay their hands on me, and my mom went through domestic violence. Physical violence, and when I went through mine, I wanted to understand the mind because mine had gotten so jumbled up. I wanted to know how to fix it. I thought that I could myself, obviously, but that's not
Right.
really something that you can do. But I ended up utilizing the things I was learning, like you said, and helping other people by just talking and being there and stuff like that. So I find it amazing that you said it came out of necessity to kind of go into that field based off of learning and stuff. Can you talk
Sure.
more of that necessity type of education?
Sure. So when I met my husband, I was 19 years old. I was very young, um, and I was home on Christmas break. So I was a sophomore in college, and up until that point, my world revolved around it hasn't changed since then, but a stereotypical college atmosphere of the parties and fraternity life. That's we would go. And um, so, but we were young and it was an immature, everybody was the same kind of. And so when I had come home on a Christmas break, um, I was introduced to my husband by accident because he was home on leave. He was active duty at the time. And he was so different. He was an adult, and I was not. Um, and I wanted to be part of that world. I was so enamored by him, and he was fun. And we became dating. And as the time went on, I began to slip so far into his world that I slipped out of mine.
Mm,
And my original goals left, and I left school to be closer to him, so it was easier for him. And it was less than a year later that we were married. He was deploying overseas, so I was
oh,
now
wow.
a young bride, a young military wife, and also I found out I was pregnant. And so as I'm now home, and I was supposed to go with him overseas and join him after he was settled, and it was about a month after he deployed that he had informed me that the military was not allowing me to join him. And so I
Oh,
was
God.
devastated. So now I'm a
Yeah.
young military wife, pregnant now without her husband.
Oh,
And it happens. So I thought,
yeah.
well, the military didn't want me. That's okay. So I had to stay home, and um, we sent pictures, and before social media, before all the long distance calling rates on overseas stuff. Um, and I we had phone bills like mortgage bills.
Yes.
Um, and
I remember
so
those.
yeah. So as time went on, and I got bigger and more pregnant, um, and my pregnancy was towards the end became difficult, and I had a doctor that put a Red Cross message in to have him come home.
Mhm.
And so for years, I believed that's actually how he came home. And it wasn't until after he passed away that I ended up finding out that isn't the reason that he came home.
Oh my
But
goodness.
um, so he had come home. We now had to adjust as a newly married couple. And it was the day he arrived that it was as if I had met a different person.
Yep.
The abuse was immediate, and it was a transition that was so instantaneous, um, between, I took it on. Um, to me, I was fat,
Yep.
and he was very clear. I had to pick out where we lived, and that was wrong. What I decorated was wrong. Um, I, every admonishment that he gave me, I took in. And so as I began all of that, um, I realized that, well, I needed to fix that. I needed to fix me. So I changed my education, trying to find ways how do I fix me? How do I fix us? How do I be a better person? Um, and so on, set my course studies,
Yeah.
thinking I could do that. Um, the fallacy, of course, is I couldn't. There's nothing I could have done.
Right.
Um, so we spent and I would call it a roller coaster because in some respects, I took great pride in the times where the roller coaster would go up and life felt good. So I felt I was doing something right. Our family looked wonderful. We were happy. And then it would crash. And so then I had to go back. I would apologize. I would find things that I need to do this better. There's a picture collage that I look at for the almost 20 years we were together, and he looks the same. There are really almost no changes that he has. But for me, I look like it's a rainbow.
Wow.
Weight, of hair colors, of physical changes. At one point, I actually weighed so little that as an adult, I fit into the same size clothes as my daughter who was in elementary school.
Oh gosh.
So I wasn't even I was in children's clothes. And so trying to be skinny enough, curvy enough,
Yeah.
um, he would use phrases like I was the smartest, dumbest person he knew,
Oh,
or I, towards the end, he finally, it was like the closest to a compliment he could give me, which was, I've gotten so used to you all these years. I, I'm okay looking at you.
mm.
And, and
Wow.
then came the but. We have enough money now. So if you'd like to fix all of this, I'll pay for it.
Mm.
That stuck with me after he passed. And I actually couldn't handle. all of that. So I did end up changing things because it was an image I couldn't, there were things I couldn't look at because all I could hear was exactly that.
Yeah.
This doesn't look, this doesn't look. And
Yeah.
so um, after so long, you don't, you don't not hear those. Um, so yeah, so the education part of it, I could be, I started to believe I was the dumbest, smartest person. I was so book smart that I couldn't be much of anything else.
Yeah.
And I just never stopped going. I didn't have all of the education because I enjoyed it. I had all of the education because I thought someday it will be better.
Yeah. You figured if you learned enough, you would learn the magic equation to
Right.
fix what was wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
And then eventually, towards the end, was when I was able to actually have a real job. And not that any of my jobs weren't real, some of them were so fulfilling and enjoyable. Um, but it was the first full time, um, sustainable position that I had been able to have without feeling that every time something happened, I had to leave, I had to quit, I had to go. Um, and that's when I actually realized that I could do better.
Yeah.
I could do better. I am better.
Hmm.
That there was inside of me started to realize I could stand on my own 2 feet. I didn't need somebody else to, I could do it all by myself.
Yeah.
Um, and so, and part of that was also, I had two young ladies who were coming into their own. And this was no longer an image, as I started to see that, this wasn't the image I wanted them to see anymore either.
Yeah.
Of me cowering or being locked in a room or have things thrown at me. Um, and the the worst of it was when my oldest had to defend me
Mm.
because I was locked in a room. And so, there, the voices, it didn't matter how many people knew or how many times I may have confided, or even people coming out of the woodworks later saying, "Oh, you know what? We thought we knew." Uh, well, that's good. um,
That doesn't
thanks.
help. Yeah, I know.
But there are also those that I'm absolutely sure had no idea,
Right.
because in general, the idea is that when we walked out our front door, we the perception that was required of us was we were the Joneses.
Yeah.
He
The
dressed
perfect
me.
family.
Absolutely. He picked my clothes out. He dressed
Yep.
me. He took me shopping. Um, and, there was an expectation of, this is how, if somebody came to the door, he wanted it to look a certain way. If I went out in public, and it got easier over time to just do it.
Yeah. I had my lipstick picked out for me. My
Oh,
actual makeup picked out for me. I was like, how are you better at this than me?"
right.
Like, but I left at 5 years and the divorce was final at 7. So, for me, it was different, and, the physical stuff never happened. So I commend you because being able to pull yourself up from that, because I remember laying on the ground not knowing what was real and what was fake. Like, I literally had that psychosis moment going, is this real because of all the lies and the things like that, and or am I living a fake, like, what's real and what's fake? And you're absolutely right. I had a lot of people tell me that I was the liar,
Yeah.
and I'm making all this stuff up and stuff like
Mhm.
that. Now, you talk about your daughters and having to be a role model for them and change a whole life for them. Your book is based on your true life story, is that correct?
It is. That's correct.
Okay. And the things that you went through and um does it also have the things that they went through
Mhm.
and
It does. For one of the hardest parts for me was and I'm sure there are a lot of people that go through this too, that come out of abusive relationships, is in my, for me, I felt I shielded them. If I could stand in between, if I could take it behind a closed door,
yeah,
if I could redirect, then I was the shield. It was just me. So they could go, and there was ignorance for them. And so couples argue, they have disagreements, and that's normal. Everybody argues. Siblings argue, parents and kids argue, friends
mhm,
argue. So that there's a normalcy in that.
yeah,
So in my mind, it was me. And but to hear how much more involved, and you do realize that children are not, they're not stupid,
nope,
and they are hearing and they are knowing, and there is a fear involved in that, for the person that is having to deal with it, and then to find out things that were, because they didn't want it to come back more on me, so they stopped telling me. They didn't want to tell me things that were also occurring, and so that was very upsetting afterwards. And it took a long time, for me to, we have very open communication. We talk about everything very, uh, there's no secrets. There's no rose colored glasses. But to find out that things were on their end also,
yeah,
um, what was very upsetting for me, because you don't want your kids to experience, and the stories that they have to be, um, the same.
yeah,
And so there are, uh, there, that was the hardest part for me.
yeah,
I
it's
can
really
I
hard.
can move forward with I can work and process mine,
Yeah.
but I never wanted them to have that kind of process.
Yeah, it's hard as a mother, to know that your child went through something that you feel that you could have protected them from, but because you didn't know that it was going on, that you didn't because you couldn't. And that's very heartbreaking as a mother.
Yeah.
Um, and it just breaks my heart, it really does. But I definitely understand it. One of the things that I didn't realize until my children were older. They're both in college now. I'm empty nesting and totally loving it. I love my kids, but
Me
I'm
too.
totally loving the empty nesting. Um, I didn't seek help for the things that I went through. I was a single parent while on active duty, once I split from the kid's father, who was also active duty. And because everyone thought I was lying about everything, I was ridiculed as the female, and now I was a single parent. I didn't get help for the trauma, so it seems that some of my trauma wore off on the kids, and um, I didn't abuse them, but I was kind of harsh on them, and I was gone all the time with my military career. So when my daughter went away to college, she told me that I was kind of toxic, and that really broke my heart because I thought I had done good. I raised them on my own. We traveled around the world and things like that, and I thought I did all that to get you guys away from him before things got really bad, because when we did split, things did get bad and threats on my life happened and things like
Sure.
that. So did when after your husband passed, did you guys go through some of those struggles where the trauma of the years that you went through all of that, um, kind of happen with your girls, or were you able to seek help and deal with that traumatic experience?
Sure. The after he passed, things became very explosive, and the outside entities that we ended up dealing with became very overwhelming for us. And
Yeah.
um, you know there were it created a cohesive bubble for us in some respects.
Yeah.
And so, while there are some people who would say, well, at least you don't have to deal with him anymore, and I'm like, no, actually, I deal. It's Yes,
Yeah.
we will always deal with it.
Yeah.
It never leaves you.
No.
But then I also traded it for a lot of other while I was at it,
Yeah.
and so did they. And it's and we lost a lot of things in the process.
Mhm.
So, and you're right, the people who come out who kind of joined a bandwagon with, well, you're lying. He was a wonderful person. He was a wonderful father. He was a pillar of the community. Um,
Yep.
and there was nothing I wrote about that I don't have a document for.
Yeah.
And and he wasn't a good military person. He got kicked out.
Mine
And
too.
so, and I'm like, but we all
Yeah.
want to glorify.
Yeah.
He was, and I didn't find the man I thought I knew after he died. It was like all of this stuff started coming out about him, and I was like, oh, I don't even know if I even knew who he was.
Mm.
So um, so it was like we had the trauma, but then we had trauma and trauma and trauma.
Yeah.
So our bond became really close. We became very honest. We
Mm.
shared. Therapy is very important.
It's
Our
awesome.
support network is also finding therapy of people um, who really understand domestic violence
Mhm.
was a struggle. And it was one of the reasons, besides finding that getting a voice was difficult, and then therapy. I know I'm not alone, because I've had these conversations with many people. There are therapists all over the place, but a therapist who really understands domestic violence and trauma and the long effects from it, and
Yeah.
we just don't get over it, and what that means, and communication. And I just don't need to sit in a group. Sometimes, so I have great days and I have not so great days.
Yep.
And you're right. The idea that, when it's not dealt with, because some days I'm not a nice person some days.
Mhm.
But because I do work with somebody and we do communicate, we do understand what that means.
Mm.
Um, complex PTSD is very different than PTSD. And for sexual assault and domestic violence and child abuse survivors, those effects bleed into our lives well beyond just the moments that somebody deals with traumatic events, and it's just now getting attention.
It is, yeah. I think it's sad that it's just now getting attention. I just want to let you know that we've had people watching, and I think they're very quiet because your story is very heartbreaking, but also very inspiring. But we did have one audience member speak up, Joanne Angelberry Cologne, Reverend Joanne Angelberry Cologne, who's a good friend of mine and is a columnist in the Author's Porch magazine that we have. She says, do we ever really know who we live with? And she's absolutely right, because there are moments you can live with somebody your whole life and find out something new about them. I mean, I'm married now for 9 years to my best friend, which one of the great things that happened out of d- divorcing my kid's biological father was I was able to find my best friend and marry him, and we've been married for 9 years now. And there we still find things out about each other all the time, and I think that it's important that I did learn after going through all of that. I was able to learn so much about myself, studying psychology and learning to get the help. And after I retired, it wasn't until after I retired that I started learning more about myself and getting help and just reaching out to people. And I think it's phenomenal that even though you worked within that field in your civil service and then civilian job, you're still wanting to help people by writing those books and telling your story in a book and putting it out there for everyone to see. It's very hard because a lot of people are scared to let people know the very raw details of their life.
Sure.
So, um, your book is out right now, correct?
It is, yes. It
Okay.
was released at the end of November.
Okay, awesome. Do you have a copy of it there? I know we put the flyers out. Okay, good. Yay.
Mhm.
Because when I saw the cover, I thought spot on because it's
Yeah.
something that nobody wants to talk about. Everyone says hush, and I actually had a supervisor when I went to talk to them. He was like, "Hey, don't tell me what's going on. I don't want to have to be," and this is his exact words. "I don't want to have to go to court if this thing goes south." And I was like, and I knew at that moment that I had to, keep everything in. I was like, "Are you serious?" So yeah, the cover was definitely spot on.
It's funny. Well, it's not funny, but it is kind of.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I had a conversation, and uh, there was a comment that was made in this conversation because they passed along. Somebody said, "Oh my gosh, Laura wrote a book," and then when they were kind of talking in this conversation, and the comment was, "Oh, that's kind of a depressing topic," and I was like, "Hmm, yes, it is,"
Yeah,
and you know, um, and she's the kind of the following with it was she put that all out there, and
yeah,
yes, I did. And it's like it is a depressing topic, and it's depressing that it's even something that is a topic to be had. We should
yep.
be depressed. We should be offended by the actual thought that this is how we treat one another.
Absolutely. And
And
it's not even
why
about women.
yeah,
Yeah, go
no,
ahead.
it's not. Oh no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but no, it's not about just women.
Mhm.
It's across the board. It's across socioeconomic. It's across, it doesn't matter what you look like, what you wear, how much money you make, where you live.
Yeah.
It's a problem everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what people don't realize is er, we hurt each other every single day, and so much that it seems commonplace. In 2019, I was sitting here having a regular day, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, I get a call from my mom, and I'm like, "Mom, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Why are you awake? Are you drinking again?" 'Cause my mom's wild and crazy anyways, and she goes, "No, Christina, Kelly's in the emergency room. She's
Mhm.
not gonna make it. You need to come home." And I said, "What happened?" She was murdered by her boyfriend from domestic violence. She laid on the floor of her bathroom for over 17 hours. He had beat her to death, and the cops had to break down the door to try to rescue her, but she didn't make it. And that's what happens.
Yeah,
We're lucky that we're still here, but every day we have to live knowing the things that we doubted ourselves
right.
for. And I love that you put that book out. I love that you have the strength to tell that story. And a lot of people say that's a depressing topic. You know what I say? Imagine living through it. Because I
Right.
put comedy in everything I do because it's my coping mechanism, and I don't do it to
Thank
diminish
you.
the topic, but it's how I cope with stuff because it helps me deal with the fact that I don't want to be sad and depressed, but I
Sure.
want you to be aware. Because if you're aware, then maybe you'll see the signs in another person.
Sure.
So, what is your next project? This book is out there. It's going to take over the world because everyone
I know.
needs to know about what's happening behind the closed doors in the perfect Jones families out there that have to paint on their faces because it's happening to a lot of people. Well, what other projects are you working on?
So currently, I'm getting the book out right now, and kind of my focus to get out there, talk, advocate, and you know, moving forward, I would like to get involved in deeper advocacy projects and speaking engagements, so that as I'm delving into these areas, I think there's a real the the generations don't change in certain areas. Domestic violence doesn't change.
Yeah.
You know how the individuals meet up and get swept away. It doesn't change. Our the way we dress and how we talk might change, but this doesn't. And so, getting involved and starting to get people to see and hear, um, you know, it's not a learn from my mistake, but just hear from the perspective and understand that these are very real. And I would like to see more people. There's a hard time with survivors at times coming out and speaking and even writing the books. And it's not that there aren't a few out there, there's quite a few. But getting out and speaking sometimes becomes difficult for the backlash. Um, and I know that I'm not necessarily, it, it doesn't absolve me from coming out and speaking. It's just that I'm I'm no longer interested in not speaking. So if the backlash comes with it, I've been silenced long enough. And
Mm.
it's more important for me for somebody to not get to where I got.
I'm just typing that quote because it's extremely powerful. I'm no longer interested in not speaking. Lara M. Sabanosh. That was powerful. Like, I really like that. I really like that. That was a very powerful quote. So I just made sure I put that in the comments. Well, what advice would you have to another author who who, just like you said, is no longer interested in not speaking up?
I think there's a myth that you come up with an idea, you're impassioned about something, and next day you just boom pop out a book. It's the Be passionate, have something, whether it's fiction, not fiction, but understand the process is time and dedication, and really taking an investment into it. It did take me time, and when you're doing a memoir like this, it's very cathartic, but it is also, you are really delving into a side of yourself that you may not have, you're reliving those moments. So
Mm.
with areas of trauma, tragedy, make sure that you're doing this with a great support network, because it does become very consuming and overwhelming at times.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Absolutely, 100%. I agree with you. Where can people reach you at, Laura, if they want to grab a hold of your book, speak to you, or just see what you have coming up?
Sure, I'm on social media, but the best way you can check out, so you know where to go to all of these, is my website, and it's my name, so www.larasabanosh.com. And you can link to all the major, for books, Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, and also my social media accounts.
Awesome. I went ahead and typed those in the comments as well. So we make sure that everyone can just click right on it. It makes it really easy. But when we're on the podcast format, they'll be able to type it in themselves. So this is the part of the show where I hand it over to you. You take charge of the show. I'll take myself off screen. You have 2 to 3 minutes to say anything that we didn't cover in the show that you want to make sure that gets out there to the world. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right, thank you.
No problem. There you go.
Thank you so much today for joining us. And I would just like to say, for those of you that are struggling right now in domestic violence situations, you're not alone. There are those of us out there who have been there, and we are there with you. I encourage you to be safe and take a step back before um, before you do anything. Please find a good support network. There are organizations that are out there, the No More campaign, domestic violence hotlines, local shelters in your area. And I encourage you to speak with someone. If nothing else, speak with somebody that you find trusted. But please reach out for help because your life is better for it.
Amen. Laura, thank you so much for coming on tonight, sharing your light, your wonderful story. Heartbreaking, but it's wonderful as well because it's one of a survivor, somebody who is never going to give up, who survived the very thing that was supposed to take them down, but turned it into a story to help somebody else come through something that is going to try to tear them apart. So thank you so much for sharing with us tonight. I am excited that your book is going to touch somebody's life in a transformational way.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for being here, everybody. Don't forget to come back each week or on the podcast right here on Facebook. You can ask Siri or Alexa to play our latest episode. Head to our website, catch the issue of the magazine, which came out the 1st of January. Head over to Amazon. You can read it free on Kindle. We want to continue making authors' dreams come true by providing them a platform to shine. We'll see you guys next time. And if you like conversations the way we do and want to become a better speaker, visit our friends Brendan and Vamsi at mastertalk.ca, where they teach you how to use the power of your voice. Don't forget, stay awake with a nice cup of coffee from Third Day Coffee Seguin, the best cup of coffee on this side of heaven, at thirddaycoffeeseguin.com. Until next time, my friends, I'm CJ. That is Lara. Go read her books and write on.
The Author's Porch is a certified veteran-hosted podcast. Show your support, tune in, share, and subscribe.